Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Burning Desire Show. And today I'm with Russell Halter, who I've come across recently in a work capacity, and then, as often happens, things like kind of flourish into more of a friendship relationship and stuff. So, thank you for joining us, Russell.
Pleasure. Thanks very much for having me, Charlie. Much appreciated.
And again, I always kind of say this, but it's like how I like to do things. I like to kind of the Steve Jobs quote: "If you can't connect the dots going forwards, only backwards." So I like to start kind of. I know your career and what you do is all in kind of finance and arranging finance for people, but like, how did you get started in that world? Like, where did that come from?
Well, like many things, I think, you mentioned Steve Jobs before, and, one of Steve Jobs' main thrusts was, he went to university, wasn't really engaged in the course that he was actually doing. Started dropping into courses and, sessions and seminars that he actually did enjoy. And that's, that for me was, pretty pretty the same. I fell into finance. There was no this is what I want to do, this is how I want to do it. I was working in a sales environment up until my mid-20s. I'd done various jobs. I'd worked in retail, I'd worked in catering, I was a chef at one point.
Wow.
Even so much as, becoming a steeplejack, and working at heights, 600, 700 feet up in the air.
Jeez.
So yeah, so there was a massive spectrum, I think, of roles that I did in my early days, and didn't know what I wanted to do. And the company I was working for was a sales business. The MD at the time weren't doing very well. We were, I think, on the cusp of a recession, and he said, "Look, I'm going to close the business, but I don't want to leave you in the SH1T, and I'm going to got you a job interview with a finance company." That happened to be Blemain Finance. As many of you'll know, Henry Moser and the team are Together, they're called now, and I started with them in December 1997.
So, did you go to university before this?
No, I wasn't particularly academic. I had done. I went to William Hume for 3 years. Was a classic underachiever. There wasn't really particularly academic. I think it was board at school, to be honest with you. There was far too many things to be doing rather than sitting learning about sort of stuff from books. Whether that is because I wasn't engaged, with that, I wasn't challenged enough, I don't know. But I then went to from William Hume, I went to Clifton College in Bristol for 2 years, did 2.5 years there, left midway through the first term of my lower sixth. Came back to Manchester, started at a college called Stan College, which is no longer there now, and we did the A-levels courses that I was doing. Smashed my ankle playing football in February of I think it was 1990.
Yeah.
So dropped out, was working then for that full school year. And this is the time, I'll be honest with you, that Manchester's music scene was in its ascendance. And I was enjoying life as an 18, 19-year-old, really. And went back to college in September of that year, 1990. Did my first year of a high national diploma in business and finance. And again, I wasn't really engaged with it. So left after that and started working. And during the course of my working and my career in finance, etc., from Together and Blemain as they were known, I was doing a little bit of broking, and then I went to work for the Manchester Building Society. Did my CMAP examinations there and was part of the mortgage development team there. And then in 2002, set up a small brokerage in Manchester called Signature Mortgages, which was targeting the professional community in Manchester. And that went pretty well. Grew the business for myself and brought my brother into the business, brought another couple of members of staff into the business, 3 advisors into the business. And before you know it, there's sort of 7 or 8 of us working within the business. Moved office, bought a building in Old Trafford, and this was 2006/7. Moved obviously everyone in there. had staff problems, like any business. And then we had the run on the Northern Rock, which I think put paid to a lot of businesses, especially in the financial services sector and various other sort of interlinked sectors. And at the same time, my father unfortunately passed away. He'd been sick with MS since probably the early 80s. So he passed away in April 2007. And I, for my own situation, I lost a lot of love for the business. I'd grown this business, and it's not easy growing a business, and I'll tell you. And staff, I wasn't very good with this sort of soft, skills required for staff. I knew what I wanted to do, I knew how I wanted to do it, but actually putting that into practice. And I made various mistakes along the way. But I think I lost the love for the business, really. And in 2008, August 2007, we had the run on the Northern Rock. By November 2007, our business levels, turnover figures had halved. So I took the decision in December 2007 to business up for sale, and the 3 consultants that were working with me agreed to buy it for a nominal figure of £1, and I passed off some liabilities that I'd taken on building the business, and the deal was done in, I think it was February 2008, at which point I went to Canada for a month. And then I went to Chile for 4 months, a month in Brazil, came back in November for 3 weeks, and then went off to Andorra for 5 months as well. So, I needed to get away, and we'll talk. I'm sure we'll go into sort of the fact of why, how, of going abroad for that amount of time, and then came back, and in 2010 set up this business, which is Precise Commercial, so assisting the SME market in purchasing assets, property, etc., etc.
So I want to circle back on a couple of things. So something that comes up actually a lot with people that I speak to across all different walks of life and different positions that they're in their early years, that I think actually is an underlying thing that separates people like yourself, entrepreneurial people, from those that maybe are not, which is the attitude and the ability to actually try different things. And to go, actually, this isn't right for me, I'm going to try something else, and not be scared of, what might my CV look like? I have to have 5 years of stability in one company / sector. I seem to find that, I'm the same. Like, people, like, you just try different things. And I think it's lost almost in this generation to a bit that, like, when you're in your late teens, early 20s, like, you need to be trying different things. Like, just because the first thing you land in does not mean it's the right thing for you.
Absolutely, 100%. And as I said, I had various jobs, from stacking shelves in warehouses, cash and carriers that my father had got for me, to trying waiting on tables, and steeplejacking, for instance.
How did that go about, steeplejacking thing?
So steeplejacking came about, was this sort of the Fred Dibner, I think, of Prestwich and Monton at the time. So my first wife, Annette, her dad was safety director of Delta Steeplejacks, who were based over in Ashton at the time. And we'd been going out for probably about 12 months or so at this point. And I had come to a bit of a loose end. And Annette mentioned this to her dad, and he said, we've got, potentially we've got a little bit of work if he wants to. So yeah, that was me, off to Fiddler's Ferry Power Station, working there, and then also was part of the team that replaced the lattice work on top of the Liverpool Cathedral, the modern cathedral. So you used to see this sort of the Liverpool skyline, the new modern cathedral at the top of Brookside, at the start of the Brookside programme. And every time I'd see it, I'd sit, think, wow, I was actually up there replacing all the spires and the lattice work.
Yeah. How long did you do that for?
So it was over a summer, so it was probably about 3 months or so. And then
You're not afraid of heights, then, take it.
no, I'm pretty good. I think as you get older, you get a little bit wiser. You know, I think it's certainly a young man's job. You know, I turned 50 in December, so this was, this was in my 20s, very early 20s as well. So I think, yeah, I probably struggled a little bit more than I did at that point.
So when you kind of got into the finance space, you kind of your old boss from the sales company found this role for you.
Yeah.
Did you compared to like all the things previously, and particularly like school you mentioned where you were disengaged and disenfranchised, whatever, did you find then after a period of time you're like, oh, this actually could be something for me, or was it just you could see opportunity there? Like, were you actually passionate about it, do you think, or no?
I think there was a little bit of both there, Charlie. So certainly I could, I was always good with numbers. Maths was one of my strong points, and sales was one of my strong points as well. And I think given the combination of both, it worked very, very well. From quite an early stage, in the finance company, I learned a lot. I'll be honest with you, that it was the best apprenticeship that you could get really at the time. And that's what I class it. Even though I was quite late coming into it, I was 24 or 25 when I joined the team at Blemain. It was some of the best knowledge that I've had. It gave me a full understanding of obviously the second charge market that then developed into the first charge market, and I wouldn't be the person I am today without that experience.
And so, did you come across Henry very much? Henry Moses, I'm talking about now, or not?
Yeah, Henry. It was strange. I remember my first day there. So I was
Just so people know, so because a lot of people don't know who listen to this or watch this, like Henry Moses is a very kind of infamous character that if you know him, you know him, but if you don't know him, you haven't got a clue who he is. And he's like probably the wealthiest guy in Manchester by some distance, but no one really knows who he is. There's no picture of Google. Like you Google him, there's nothing comes up. Like it's hilarious.
Yeah, absolutely. So there'll be a couple of little footnotes. That's it. So basically, I was taken round by a guy called John Stead from Rotherham, who'd moved up. He was working for one of the brokers that used to work with Blemain, and then had moved up to Manchester in probably 1996, I think. And he took me around the floor. So at the time, this is going back to 97, December 97, so a good few years ago. And at the time, they were all working literally on one floor in Bracken House. It's not the big, huge operation that they are now. And he'd introduced me to this one, Barry Matthews, who's the in-house solicitor there, Adrian Grant, who ran the professional sort of commercial sort of side, Steve Hayward, who ran the sort of unsecured side. And I'm going around saying hello to all these.
Mark Goldberg there at the time.
Mark, yeah. So Mark was the sort of contact. He was the conduit for me to join there because I'd grown up with Mark. Mark on a social level.
Oh wow.
And John turned around and said, have you met Henry before? So I said, no. And he sort of leads me towards this character who had, who, I'll be honest with Charlie, he looked like the cleaner. So he is quite a diminutive sort of figure. He's only probably 5'2", 5'3". And I remember walking sort of towards this character, and he had sort of a little bit sort of slick back hair, a little bit greasy, and this big Abercrombie sort of like overcoat in with a ripped lapel and stuff like that. And I thought he was introducing me to the cleaner. So I was with you. And John said, "This is Henry." So Henry turned around, and he had his little cigar, his the little stump of his cigar in his right hand. Oh, yeah, you're right. I gave me a chat, and he is the most down to earth guy you'll ever meet, and one of Henry's, amazing talents and gifts. And he's brilliant. He's a very, very intuitive, intelligent guy. Is that he remembers names?
Is that what it is?
And he's got he remembers stuff, and I can. Last time I saw Henry was probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and straight away he said, "Hi, Russell, how are you?" And it was, and I'd not seen him for probably 10, 12 years.
Wow.
And that is what set him apart. It's his ability to be able to remember people, and have that down to earth. A lot of people with money, consider themselves better.
Mm-mm.
They get this arrogance about them, but Henry's never been like that. As far as I'm concerned, and as far as my dealings have been with him, he's always been straight down the line. This is it. You get what you see, and that's the beauty of Henry. So yeah.
And I guess like how is like just on him a minute because it's interesting and you've a better inside knowledge than most. Like where was that business at when you were there? And like because now it's like from what I've seen, they're loan out like 4 or 5 billion or something a year. Like it's
Yeah.
a crazy
So,
scale.
well, I think, getting out the door on the second charge market, which was probably one of the biggest sort of departments. We were probably doing maybe 200 grand, 250 grand a month.
Yeah.
Out the money out the door. And it's massive. They've recruited very, very well. One of my ex-colleagues, Chris Bagley, who was at Yorkshire Bank and then head of underwriting at the Manchester Building Society, was approached by them about, must have been about 10, 12 years ago now. And Chris phoned me up and said, look, I need to take you out for lunch. Well, this is strange. Chris Bagley taking me out for lunch, what's going on here? And it was basically he'd been approached by Together, Blemain at the time, to head up their professional team and obviously target professional contacts in Manchester. And yeah, he wanted to put my brains on the people behind it, and he's now been there for 10, 12 years. Slightly more. I saw Chris we're about a month or two ago now. It's unfortunate a funeral of a contact of both of ours, a guy called Bo Khan, who untimely death, sent shockwaves through the Manchester property and finance world.
Well. So that was your kind of way you cut your teeth, I guess. So how and why do you think you fell out of favor with love of the business that you started?
Just too many moving parts. I wasn't doing the sort of stuff that I wanted to be doing, Charlie. I was very, very good at going out there and getting business in, and meeting, greeting, and essentially promoting the business.
Yeah.
On a business development sort of level. What I quickly realized that being a managing director of a small financial services company is that you've got many, many hats, and you can't just do what you want to do and where your skill set is. And as I mentioned earlier, it was the soft skills. It was dealing with staff. Oh, you can't come in today. Oh dear, that's really sorry. You get yourself better, and I'm saying like, look, if I can get in, you can get in. Sort yourself out. So that proved challenging. And then in 2006, my mum had a really bad car crash in France, and basically that changed the business for good, because my brother, who was working with me, who'd been working with me since probably 2002, end of 2002, left business. Elliot had come back up from London. He was on a graduate training program in London. Mum had been re-diagnosed with cancer. She'd had cancer in the 90s. It then obviously transpired that it'd come back or had never gone away, and they found it up her back. So he came back to Manchester, started in the business. And then I suppose I put a lot of pressure on Elliot, to be the ops guy. Elliot wasn't a natural business developer. He's quite shy, quite a humble guy. Cool guy, really, really cool guy, but wasn't particularly comfortable getting out there and singing, from the top of the sort of roofs that this is what we're doing, this is how we do it. And he became the ops director, and I was putting obviously quite a bit of pressure on him, and he basically decided that he could do it on a smaller basis potentially, and that's what he did. He left the business, at which point I promoted staff possibly when I shouldn't have done really. I brought the office manageress, who will remain nameless. She had come around, but then there was problems with her. She wasn't quite right. Originally we had an office in Stockport, and then we moved to also Old Trafford. And then she was taking more and more sick leave and stuff like that. And at one point, she was off sick, and basically she started paying herself in the bank account and all sorts of stuff. So there was a catalogue of issues, and all these things put in place, along with obviously my father passing away, and go into that. I took a good few weeks off. It hit me very, very hard, and at the time I was dating a girl who was a lot younger than me. And some of my addictive tendencies were playing out, which I didn't realize, were a bad thing. And these came to the fore, I think, in 2006/7, etc. So yeah, it was just a culmination of things, and given that the run on the Northern Rock happened, that made the decision quite easy. It was either stay and fight, batten down the hatches, and try and get through this, or actually, get rid and go again. And that's what I did.
So what led you to, you spent a lot of time in different countries. Is it kind of a bit gung ho, or did you specifically choose Andorra? You mentioned Brazil and other places.
So basically, I was quite a keen snowboarder. I took up snowboarding quite late in life, and had been to Canada the previous year, 2006, with the guys. Loved it. Oh no, I think it was actually that earlier that year, actually. And so all this was going on, and I was burning the candle at both ends. You've asked me to talk about addiction in this, and suffice to say, I was doing quite a lot of cocaine at the time, and maybe this didn't allow me any clear thought, any clear sort of thinking. But I suppose the plan was to go to Canada, have a holiday, do my CASI level 1 snowboard instructing, and then go to Chile to snowboard instruct for a season over there, and completely do a change of lifestyle, really, rather than being in professional services, etc. Go and follow my heart. I love snowboarding. I wanted to really teach people snowboarding, etc.
Wow.
So that was the plan. But in hindsight, the plan had a few fundamental flaws. And sometimes when people put substances inside them to change and make alter the way they think, they're not really sort of thinking rationally and thinking correctly. And one of the biggest sort of mistakes I made is I didn't even think about the fact that most people in Chile that were learning to, or would want to learn to snowboard, spoke Spanish.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So a fundamental flaw that I was thinking, well, there might be a few people, speak English, etc., etc. There wouldn't, the language barrier wouldn't be too much, and it became apparent very, very quickly that a lot of the people that were learning to ski and snowboard especially in Chile, were either Chilenos, Chilean people, or they're from Argentina, who again spoke Spanish, or Brazil, again, who spoke Portuguese.
Yeah.
So essentially, that 4 week, that season there, turned into, first of all, a learning curve for me, in terms of snowboarding, etc. But also a learning curve in terms of learning a language. I'm now proficient. I wouldn't say by any means I'm fluent in Spanish, but I'm proficient. I can get by in most situations. So that was, I suppose, the one of the sort reasons I went there, but also, they call it a geographical, and when we first started talking about doing this podcast, I mentioned obviously I'm a recovering addict. I've been sort of sober, clean, however you want to describe that, for over 8.5 years now. And we touched on, various things, and one of the things that it's classed as, it's called doing a geographical, changing where we live, because we feel there's something not quite right. And the problem with doing a geographical is that no matter where you go in the world, whether it's in the UK, whether it's Europe, whether it's, South America, the person that is going to be there when you get there is yourself.
Yeah.
So, one of the stories that I had is that, I went to, my best thinking took me to South America. I should get cut for here. And, for at the time I was using, a lot of cocaine, etc. Basically, that's the madness, isn't it? You go to, somewhere where that is producing a lot of high grade, quality cocaine for a cocaine addict. That's where my best thinking took me, and that's when you sort of talk about the madness, that you lose the power of, rational thought, essentially.
So just going back a touch, you mentioned when you're 18, 19, I think you similar to my uncle, because we actually yesterday went on like a walking tour in Manchester. He's an architect, and he was showing me different buildings, and one of them was the Hacienda and stuff. Yeah. Was that the kind of scene that you were involved in at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just spin the laptop around. You can see I've actually got a. There we are. So that was a picture I had commissioned by a lady called Jackie Erskine, who now lives in Channel Isles.
Okay.
And she does various pictures, etc. But I commissioned that, earlier this year, having seen some of her other work. So yeah, so my
what is that? Sorry, for who haven't seen that.
So that's a hacienda.
Oh, it is the hacienda. Yeah.
So that was the hacienda as it was probably in 1997, 98.
Okay.
And it's it's a beautiful watercolor picture basically, and yeah, so I got that commissioned earlier this year. So yeah, to suffice to say, my life was centered around the Manchester music scene. So Hacienda, the Boardwalk, Price Night with the venue, Brick House, and various Camelot on a Thursday. We drive down to Shelley's in Stoke, Shelley's Laserdome in Stoke.
Wow.
On Friday night.
So but the thing is, everyone else was involved in the scene, the same substances, whatever else. At that point, were you using more than everybody else, or it was not like you didn't see it was just what everyone was doing? It was a party scene.
Yeah, I think we were. There was, I always struggled to sort of stop. I think that was the key. It was, I was always the one to say, right, where are we going next? What we're doing next? Where are we going out next? I suppose you call it last man standing. You know what I mean? Whatever else, I remember the first time I took ecstasy, which was a conspiracy. A friend of mine now lives in Fort Lauderdale, and I had our first ecstasy tablet in, I think it was 89. And it was, everyone else was coming down. This gentleman and I were still buzzing. Can you still feel it? Yeah, I can still feel it. It was great, and it changed my life for the better. But also, there's a dark side to everything, isn't there? Too much of a good thing is a bad thing, as they say. Moderation is the key.
How did that change your life for the better? I'm curious.
So it allowed me to meet people, experience things that normal people just didn't experience. I met a lot of really, really cool, interesting people, in the course of my journey, and I learned a lot about, I think, the world itself, not just, from books, etc., but actually experiencing it. You know, you ask anyone in that sort of that time, etc., and people say, "Oh yeah, I used to hear about Hacienda and this, that, and the other." I was there, you know, from a regular from early 1990 till it closed.
Wow.
And it was, it was a special club. You know, I was in there when there's guns going off and police coming in, and yeah, it was bonkers. But I also lost time there. I remember, taking one particular pill, which was a special K, which was ecstasy laced with ketamine. This is
Okay.
before ketamine became the sort of drug it is now.
Yeah.
And basically, yeah, I lost 4 hours of my life, in there. Pop pill must have been about 10:30ish, and literally came to at 2:30 in the morning. Couldn't tell you who I'd spoken to, what I've been doing, why I've been doing it. It was just that 4 hours of my life is completely blank.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that, and you don't, I suppose, you don't sort of, and this is obviously my mid-20s, you don't think about these sort of things until you get a little bit older and think the what ifs, what if had fallen in the canal.
There's, I think I mentioned it. Well, I mentioned this to you before we started recording about. I happened to coincidentally watch Matt Willis from the band Busted. His it's called Baffling Addiction on iPlayer if you want to watch it.
Yeah.
And when he's gone into looking as to why because he says a similar thing to you. Like he was always the guy that was asking for more. He was always the guy going a bit further than everybody else. That kind of thing. And I don't know if it's related to you also, but he figured out that a lot of it stems from childhood and different things. Do you think it's same with you, or what's the view generally? Is it some people are more susceptible to being addicted to stuff? Where does addiction come from, in your opinion?
Well, I was having this conversation with a friend last night. It's either, is it nature, is it nurture? And my auntie tells me that even from a very, very young age, I was always had this burning desire to cause chaos. I'd be in my high chair at sort of 11 months old, and I'd be looking to sort of grab hold of something and throw something.
Wow.
So I would say that it was always in my nature. And looking back on my past and my situations, I would say that I think I was always an addict. I didn't know it at the time. I was obviously a youngster, but I always wanted, the next best thing, and always had to have the best, sort of bike, and I would manipulate to get these things. I was a master manipulator to be able to get what I wanted. And it's only having looked at this, in recovery, I can actually look at some of my behaviors and think actually that wasn't quite right. It's, some of the sort of stuff I used to get up to as a kid wasn't quite right.
Well, I'm just trying to get the chronology. So when did you come into the financial services? Was that alongside the party scene, or was the party scene just before you started?
I think it was just sort of similar sort of time, 97, really.
Right.
So, the Hacienda sort of pretty much just closed. There's still a scene on, but I think the scene was moving from club to bar.
Right.
So basically, we'd had obviously the sweaty ecstasy sort of years in the sort of late 80s all the way through to sort of mid sort of 90s. And now we were more, the scene was growing up really. We were all getting to our mid 20s, maybe late 20s. And, we didn't want to be sort of stuck in a sweaty box, on a
Yeah, I was
Saturday
gonna
night,
say.
yeah. So we were a little bit more, dare I say it, sophisticated. And the rise and usage of cocaine, was more prevalent at this
Right.
particular time.
So during all this period when you're starting a business, whatever else, you're using, but it's only on a weekend you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for instance, and these things tend to creep up on you. Very much a weed smoker, throughout all this sort of time. And
Like daily? We're talking daily.
yeah, absolute daily. But
Yeah.
I would try and, when I was working for myself, etc., it would be in the evenings as a way to relax. I'd get my work done and relax. And um, the cocaine use would be usually on maybe potentially Thursday night if we were feeling a bit cheeky, but mainly, at weekend, maybe
Yeah.
on a Saturday night.
And in certain environments, or would you do it by yourself at home also?
Oh yeah, it was very, very much a social sort of thing.
It wasn't like you were at home, like just waking up and
No. In formative years, certainly it was a social thing.
right.
But and I always liken drug use to the reason that we took drugs initially was to open our minds, to experience these things, and over a matter of time, your world becomes smaller, 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 smaller. That you don't want to be going out. That literally your world is in this little sort of snapback. You don't want to be sort of mixing with anyone because it will take you away from obviously using drugs.
Right.
So your world quickly collapses into literally a room, where
So
you've
it
got
starts. So it starts with socially, Thursday occasion, mainly weekends, and like,
yeah.
what can you pinpoint at what point it starts to really become like, as you say, like an isolated, it's me and the drug situation?
No, there wasn't. It was because at the time I had a partner, and we were using together,
Uh-huh.
and it was the old sex, drugs, and house.
Yeah.
It was basically we would it'd be a party for two. You know what I mean? And that was it. And we'd binge. We'd be up for maybe 2, 3, 4 days. Using cocaine and weed and whiskey and what have you, and doing all the stuff that adults do. Under
Yeah.
the influence.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, this sort of came through over sort of like probably about sort of 7, 8 months, 9 months,
Right.
that we did this. And then that relationship ended after we came back from Andorra. And I suppose I went not on the rampage, but was looking for something else to fill that void,
Okay.
and there were various girls, etc., that came into my life for various amounts of time.
Yep.
But none really sort of stood the test of time, really.
So, and like how bad does it get? So you come back from Andorra, you're like you've had this period of time with this girl. Do you think like if you hadn't been with this girl, would you still have somehow got to where you got to, or you think that was a catalyst because she was kind of maybe promoting it also,
Um, well, it's a tricky one to say. My dad used to have a phrase. If your aunt had balls, she'd be your uncle. It's the big if word, isn't
Say that
it?
one more time.
If your aunt had balls, she'd be your uncle.
Okay.
So basically, who knows what would have happened? All I can say is that my drug usage, had become unsustainable. At one point in before we'd gone over
You
to
mean that by financially or that also?
yeah, financially, yeah, literally so financially, at one point, at the worst point, I was spending £3,000 a month, on cocaine.
Jesus. Wow.
In terms of physically, there'd be times where I couldn't get cocaine up my nose. Literally, it was that blocked. It would just literally fall.
Wow. Wow.
Um,
Wow. Wow.
so, but strange things happen, and I remember one particular incident, and this is probably the last time I had cocaine. Is I'd been seeing a girl from sort of the local area, and she'd phoned me. We'd arranged to see each other on Saturday evening, and she phoned me up on the Saturday morning or something like that. I said, "Look, um, give you a heads up. I've got some cocaine here. My friend said it was shit. Do you want me to bring it around with me?" Yeah, I bring it around with you. Of course. Absolutely, yeah. And it was shit. It was stamped all over. It was very, very low quality. But, you use it, you don't know, you don't care. You don't know what what's in it, you just put it up your nose, because that's the madness of drug addiction, and this particular, Sunday morning, I'd woken up with this girl by my side, done the cocaine and stuff like that, and I thought, I'm done. It was weird. It was just like, in the past sort of like 10, 12 years or so doing cocaine, I'd never had a morning like this where I thought, you know what, I'm done with it. And for me, that was special. That was a special day. However, the thing that I couldn't put down, Charlie, which people talk about being non-addictive and non-physically addictive, is the weed.
Right.
The weed was, for me, the hardest thing to put down. Harder than, whiskey or beer or what have you. I wasn't a very good drinker when I was, first sort of growing up. I remember, 14, 15, I had 2 or 3 drinks, I'd throw up. I wasn't very good at, keeping alcohol in my stomach. So, when I first had my first joint, I was 15, I was at Clifton College. I was outside of Bristol Zoo on Clifton Downs, if anyone knows it. And I remember smoking this joint and just having 2 or 3 drags, and just everything, wow, just everything just went into, Lumicolor. It's just a beautiful thing. And I remember, having a Mr. Whippy ice cream, from one of the bands, and it was the most amazing, incredible ice cream I've ever tasted at the time. And so that was my first experience with weed, and it hit me, and it got me straight away. And it took me then, that was when I was 15, it took me till I was 42.
Wow.
To actually stop using weed, and that
30 years near enough.
that was pretty much most days. I would say, from the age of probably 16, it was every day,
Wow.
and at the end of my using, it wasn't smoking, bags of skunk like the kids do nowadays. It was literally small one skinners, but I'd have, a one skinner, which is like a little Rizzler paper about this big with a little worm, essentially, of resin. I have that with my double espresso. And I thought this was normal. I thought this, people did this. But it killed me. It really did kill me, because I couldn't stop. I wanted to stop. I really did. I'd look at my, I'd get to 12, 1 o'clock, and I'd done not a jot of work. I'd sort of answered maybe a couple of emails, done the bare minimum. My ex-wife at the time, we were married, she'd go off to work, she had a decent job. And I'd say to her, we've moved into a house in Monton, and I'd say to her, look, just do me a favor, hide, I don't want to smoke today, just hide the weed. Just put it somewhere so I can't find it. So she'd go out to work, she'd hide the weed, and literally I'd wake up, and for the first hour or 2 hours of the day, I'd be looking for weed. That was the madness.
Wow.
And it was all consuming, for me, in terms of wanting, this crutch. I wouldn't be able to operate without it. So that was, that was quite, shocking. And it wasn't, until I got into the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous that I understood, what addiction was really,
So just on the weed thing, I'm curious because more and more now, particularly in America and I think Canada as well, it's
they're all legalizing it. Yeah.
What's your view on this? Because people seem to say to me, "Oh, it's this natural thing. It's not an issue." Like, what's your view? You've lived.
I think we are. Going to run into problems with it in terms of psychological effects that it has on people. The human brain doesn't fully form until it's 24, 25. You've got kids now smoking very, very potent skunk, weed, etc., from a very, very young age, far younger than I was. These kids are regular smokers at 13, 14, and 15. Mm-hmm. There's been an uptick in psychosis. We've seen, kids being put into various mental institutions. They have been given Ritalin, which essentially is amphetamine, to control ADHD, etc. Which is a very, very much a very, very vogue term at the moment. Oh,
Yep.
they're a little bit crazy, they're a little bit hyperactive. Well, let's put a label on them. I think it's a very, very slippery slope that we're going down. In terms of obviously legalizing. I've got a friend, for instance, who lives in Fort Lauderdale, and he came off everything, for a long time, because he had thankfully it was a benign tumor in his head. And he came off everything for a number of years, and basically, with the advent of the prescriptions, if you like, the decriminalization, the legalization of marijuana or herbal marijuana, he now smokes like a chimney. He's smoking probably $60 to $80, $100 worth a week. Of some very, very fine stuff. Whether or not that's going to have a medium to long term impact on him, I'm not sure.
Does he see it as an issue, or he sees it's fine now because it's legalized type thing?
He sees it's fine. He sees absolutely fine. Basically, he looked at it as, look, it's a little bit of weed and it's fine. I can do what I need to do.
So he's not like been an addict before or something, or
No, he can stop. He smokes a lot of weed by all means, but he hasn't got that. He can when he wants to stop, he can stop.
okay,
that's the thing. I'm just going to grab a glass of water, Charlie.
no problem. I'll pause the recording for a second.
Okay.
All right, so we just stopped it just so we could both get a glass of water. But I want to go back to something you talked about where you woke up next to this girl, you'd had this crappy cocaine, and you for some reason said, right, I've had enough of this stuff. Like, what did you do then?
So, I'd look at, so it was a spiritual awakening. It wasn't. I think it was just boredom. I just taken it to the nth degree, and that was it. Now, I'd kick the fucking shit out of it, basically. I'm bored of it. I unfortunately find the rooms. It's great. I've met many, many beautiful people, in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, and I wasn't. I was 42, 41, 42 when I came into the rooms. There seems to be a lot more younger people, that are coming into the rooms now, and it's good. It's great to see. The younger you can get in it, the cleaner you can get, and the more you're going to get out of life. So my journey into Narcotics Anonymous, as I said, started in October 2014. I'd been to a meeting in the August 2014 and just decided it wasn't for me. As I said, I was smoking a little bit of weed, nothing, no huge amounts, etc. And I went to a meeting in Bolton, and the guys, it's very much, a listening experience. Just listen to what everyone's saying, and if you feel there's any identification, then you're in the right place. And all I heard was these guys, taking crack cocaine, heroin. They were taking methadone. They were drinking 2 bottles of vodka a day. And then there's little old Russell smoking a little bit of weed. So I didn't get any identification. I just thought they were completely different. I thought, I came out of that meeting, I phoned my ex-wife, who was my wife at the time, and said, look, so, hey, great, good news. I'm not a drug addict. I don't need Narcotics Anonymous. And it was October of that year that basically I was suffering from postnatal depression. I know men aren't meant to get postnatal depression, but I'm susceptible to depression. That's been prevalent in my sort of adult life over the last sort of like 10 years or but that's obviously another story for another day. And this particular morning, Rachel, my wife, was carrying Cecily, and I grabbed hold of her while Cecily was being held by Rachel. Um, Needless to say, shit hit the fan. I went up to Edinburgh to stay with some friends for a few days. Rachel obviously took advice, and at the time, Rachel took me back with certain conditions. And one of those was, I went to the doctor to get something for the depression. I did some CBT. I went on a domestic violence course via Relate, who are now TLC, which is Talk, Listen, Change, and also to look at Narcotics Anonymous and try and get off weed. And that was October.
You weren't using coke at this point. When you
No.
said you were stopping, you just stopped.
So it was basically weed and alcohol.
Okay. So you went to NA, and what was that like? Were you invested in this point because of the relationship side of things?
Very much so. And I was very lucky to meet my first sponsor there. The first meeting at in October. Obviously, I've been to the one in August 2014, and didn't really think that I had anything in common with these people. And then I went to the one in October 2014, and was lucky enough to meet my then first sponsor. And
What does that mean for people that don't know?
so basically, a sponsor is someone that takes you through the 12 steps. It's a 12-step recovery program. So and they'll take you through the steps. They'll sponsor you. They'll be on hand to assist you when the dark times come, and they do.
So you like slot phone numbers type thing, and you're like, hey, I'm
Right.
this, that, and the other. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So the whole essence is for them to be someone that you can rely on. In terms of being able to assist them when they feel like using.
Okay.
Yeah. So they say before you use, give someone a call. Because it may well be that you get through the next 5-10 minutes, maybe an hour or something.
Okay.
That requirement to use will dissipate.
Right.
And that's sometimes what it's like. Coming off weed, heroin, cocaine, ecstasy, ketamine, and even cocodamol nowadays. People are throwing codeine down the necks like the smartest. And I know a number of people. Some even serving policemen that have got problems with pain relief, cocodamol, etc. And are going to their doctor to say, "I've got a really bad back. Can you give me anything for it?" Knowing full well that they'll get a prescription for codeine. And yeah, so I was lucky to meet my first sponsor, at this particular meeting, and he said, "It's not what you use, Russell; it's how you use it." And that sort of struck me like a lightning bolt. Because I wasn't using, as I said, huge amounts of cocaine, or weed at the time, but it was a daily thing. I was using as a crutch. I was using, I didn't understand the term crutch, but what is a crutch essentially? It's an appliance to help you and assist you walk. Yeah, and I used weed as an appliance to assist me through life. The reason I used to tell myself that I used to, because my brain was too quick. It slowed me down. It allowed me to, and I had a very, very quick brain. And if I smoked weed, it allowed me to sort of like just mellow and sort of like stay with my thoughts, etc. But that's the narrative that we tell ourselves. But in reality, it's bullshit.
Hmm.
So
How long did it take you to come off the weed after you met
literally,
your sponsor?
literally first day. So I remember going to the meeting on a Monday, and after my first meeting, I was thinking, well, look, I'll come off the weed, but alcohol has never really been a problem for me. I can still drink. It was only the second meeting, and they suggest that you go to 90 meetings in 90 days initially,
Wow.
which is, creating a new habit, isn't it? It's
Big
breaking
commitment.
that one and creating a new habit. That's what this 3 months comes in. And I went, to the next meeting, and they have various cards that you read, and one of the portions of the card said, alcohol is a drug. We are the people with the disease of addiction, and we must abstain from all drugs in order to survive. And that's, I remember my last beer was on, 22nd or 23rd of October 2014, and sat there. This is the day after I'd been, the day of the meeting. So I played football on a Monday night, and I had a beer, after football and stuff like that. That was the last beer I had, apart from obviously non-alcoholic beers.
Yeah.
Anything, mind altering. Some people frown upon, oh well, you shouldn't be drinking any beer in any capacity, even if it is non-alcoholic. But for me, it's the key phrase is mind altering,
Right.
and non-alcoholic beer doesn't alter my mind, and therefore, I'm happy.
How
Okay.
obviously you're around people drinking all the time with like doing what you do and anyone is, but and different things. Like how do you just like keep clear of it? Like what's your kind of you just don't get in
Um,
the place?
it, for me now, it doesn't really bother me. I think sometimes it bothers other people. I went out
Right.
on a date with a girl a few months ago now, and they went fine. We had a little kiss afterwards, and we'd arranged, loosely to have a second date. And during the course of the next week, I felt that the texts that I was getting back weren't conducive to a second date.
Right.
So I left it. I'm not pushing, water up a hill. So I just
Yeah.
left it. And about a week went by, and I got this text saying, "Hey Russell, sorry, for the lack of communication. It's not usually like me, but I'm really struggling with the non-drinking thing. I want to. I'm not saying that alcohol's everything to me, but I like a drink, and I'd like to be able to party, with my partner. So, that's the reason. I wish you all the luck in the world, and you're really cute. But hey ho, and that's
Do
what.
you, on a first date, if someone's like, "Hey, do you want a glass of wine or something?" Do you tell them straight away?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I try to. Yeah, I try to. So it's one of those really. What was I meant to say? Oh well, don't worry, I'll start drinking now. I'm 8 years, sober, but because you want to drink, I'll start drinking, shall I? Yeah, that's really intelligent. So you've got to accept people like that. Some
Sure,
people.
surely it's pretty unusual for someone that is quote unquote an addict to, as you have, like stop cocaine, weed, and alcohol so quickly without relapsing. That's probably quite unusual, no?
Um, I wouldn't say unusual. I'd say that it depends where you are, and it depends how you grasp the process. I
Yeah.
speak to people on a daily basis. I had a text from one of the guys that I know who's really struggling. He's had a periods of sobriety, a week, a month, couple of months, etc., etc. But then he's had a relapse,
Yeah.
and can't seem to be able to get off the stuff. Um, I count myself as very, very lucky, Charlie, if I'm being completely, and brutally honest, because I know how hard it is. I remember my formative years, and one of the things that they do say in the rooms is that the newcomer is the most important person in the room. This is twofold, the reasons behind this. The first reason is that they want to get off drugs, and that's perfect, and that's really important for themselves and also for the group, and the reason the extra of the actual community.
Yeah.
But secondary, it allows us that have got to just bear with me a second.
Yeah, go for it.
Ready?
There you go. Tom.
Apologies about that.
No problem.
And it allows us new old timers, I can't say an old timers, guys that have, you know, got 28, 30, 35 years sobriety, you know, so in that's a grand scheme of things, I'm only a baby.
Yeah.
It allows us to understand and remember how it was in the formative months and days, because as you get further and further and further into the program, you don't have those physical sort of like reactions to weed. I remember, walking down Market Street in my formative, 3, 4, 5 months, and I smell the weed, and it put me into a bit of a tailspin. Oh God, because all the neurons would start firing and stuff like that. Yeah. Now it still affects me, but it doesn't have the same. I'm actually like, oh God.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like an old person, you know what I mean? Whereas when, maybe 10, 12 years ago, I probably would have taken a deep sort of like breath and, like savored the flavour. But nowadays, I'm sort of like one of these tutting sort of like old people, which is a little bit funny.
So here's what I want to kind of like. I think a nice way to round the conversation off. It's about newcomers, right? Yeah. Say someone's listening to this, watching this, whatever, and they're the person that knows they've got an issue with addiction, or it's someone listening, watching this that knows someone that, like a family member or a friend that has. Yeah. What would your advice for both those sets of people be right now?
If you feel that you've got a problem with addiction, with substances, whether any addiction, addiction is rife now, and I think this is due to the fact that we've got so many choices, But I've met people with gambling addictions, with food.
Hold on, Russell. Sorry, so I'll just go. I think it's your internet, is it? Can you hear me, Russell?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yeah. So just go again. So you're giving advice as to.
So basically, if you feel that you've got any sort of addiction problems, there are groups, communities out there that will be able to help you. There's Gamblers Anonymous, there's Cocaine Anonymous, there's Narcotics Anonymous that have been very, very good with me. Alcoholics Anonymous, that's obviously is probably the most well known of the 12-step programs. But there is help out there. You've just got to be brave enough, and brave enough to actually want to to take part. And I would always say to anyone, is go into this with an open mind, like you did when you first took a drug. Help is there, but you need to want to, help yourself.
And then the advice for someone that knows someone has or signs of addiction, like what do they do? What should they do?
That's the $1 million question. You're only an addict when you say you're an addict. Yeah, does that make sense? So you might see your a friend, a brother, a relative or what have you, a co-worker with addictive tendencies. They might dismiss you for many, many years. It's only when they actually say, you know what, I've got a problem here, that the help can actually start.
Yep.
Because I've seen it before, people, if they don't think they've got a problem, like I did my first meeting, I went into that Bolton meeting, I'm sat there with a table, there's only 6 or 7 people around the table, and there's Dave is drinking 2 bottles of vodka a day. There's this one that's smoking crystal meth. That one's digging heroin. This one's on crack cocaine, sucking a glass dick. You know what I mean? I'm sitting there thinking, I should be here. I'm a middle class sort of guy. I smoke a little bit of weed. I came out of there actually so far removed from thinking I was an addict. Yeah. It was actually counterproductive for me to actually be an addict. Yeah. I thought, I'm cured. Hallelujah. Fuck me. I'm nothing like these guys. These guys were living in social housing. Some of them were living in hostels and stuff like that. Yeah. there were street urchins, and there's Russell, middle class, nice car, smoking a bit of weed. And it goes back to that saying I said before: it's not what you use, it's how you use it.
Mm.
And if you feel that you cannot function without putting something inside that alters the way that you think, then maybe, just maybe, you might need to speak to someone with a little bit more knowledge.
Wow.
I'm sponsoring people at the present moment in time, and it brings me a lot of satisfaction, to help them, because addiction is a selfish pastime. It's all about me, when you sponsor someone, when you take the plunge, you're then able to potentially, get out yourself and get out your head. And, that's a beautiful thing.
Well, that's such an interesting interview, man. Like, I really appreciate it. I'm sure people will watch or listen to this and get something, like, even if they're not addicted or whatever, but to anything. But I think just the general like approach that you have on things and the honesty that you shared is really commendable.
Thank you very much, and it's good to see you, Charlie. And I would say that if anyone does get anything out of this, everyone wants to chat, my door's always open, my telephone's always on. More than happy to talk through, and signpost, guideline, whatever they need, to talk about their own issues or a friend's issues, because it's becoming more and more a problem. So,
Thanks so much for your time, Russell.
okay, cheers.